We have a training center in Portland called Montessori Northwest, where I'm a trainer. And so I brought some paperwork that if you've ever, well, may I get a show of hands? Who already is a Montessori teacher in the audience? Excellent. If you decide you want another training, please come to Montessori Northwest. If you're primary, maybe you want to be elementary, maybe you want to take A to I, etc. And if you're a parent who is in love with Montessori and you've decided, well, I'm tired of my career as a fill in the blank, please come join us in Portland. We have 6 courses which are enrolling right now at all 3 levels of training, academic year style or summer style. So there's information over yonder, and there's a form if you want to have somebody like me contact you and say, okay, let's talk. What do you want to do? I'm happy to do that. Here we have Dr. Carol Dweck. Somebody in our audience is already halfway through the book. I have read this book. She is a psychology professor at Stanford. She's been doing this work a while, since the mid-70s. She graduated from Yale with her degree in 1972 with her doctorate. And what drove her to do research is she wondered how a person's self-theory of intelligence affects their life. How it is that when you reflect on your own theory of intelligence, how does that affect, well, a wide variety of things. We'll talk about that. So what is mindset? Here's one definition: the implicit theory that a person develops about their intelligence. Implicit means unknowing. So it's not like it's made overt, but it's something that you have within you that until you think about it, you probably don't even know that it's true. So the thing that Dweck studied is how is it that this mindset that we have, well, she understood or discovered that it helps shape our world, it shapes our perceptions of the world, our interactions. It affects things like our abilities, our perceptions of our abilities. It causes us to attribute our intelligence to several different things or one or the other of a certain thing. This begins at birth. From birth, we're interacting with our environment, and we're assessing how intelligent we are and what our abilities are. Does mindset matter? Here's a quote from Henry Ford. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you are right. It is very much in the frame of mind. Does mindset matter? Some people say yes, some people say no. The research shows that the way you view yourself and your intelligence actually does affect a wide variety of things. It affects your personality, it affects your moral character, your creativity. It affects what motivates you, it affects your persistence and your resilience, and it affects your self-control and your will. So these types of things are often called non-cognitive skills. They won't be measured on any standardized tests. However, they do have a profound effect on life, not just as a student in a Montessori classroom, not just as a 12-year-old or an 18-year-old, but even in later life, your mindset can affect things like your relationships, whether you have successful personal relationships or not, things like employment, whether you can hold a job, things like your general happiness with life, and whether you end up in jail or addicted to drugs or not, things like this are affected by the mindset that you have. So this question, where does intelligence come from? It's actually at the root of what Dweck, she discovered that this is very much the foundation of what causes people to have one mindset over the other. So it's the old nature versus nurture thing. If you think that intelligence is something you're born with, that it's inherent and innate to you, kind of like how if you have curly hair or green eyes, straight hair and brown eyes, those things that our genetic coding dictates. If you think intelligence is that, that means you can't really improve it much. What you get is what you get. It's an entity way of thinking about intelligence. I'm born with a certain degree and it's not going to get very much bigger. Another way of viewing it is that it's something that can be worked like a muscle, that the more you practice, the more you devote yourself to something, be it water skiing or algebra, that the more you practice and pay attention with intention, that you can get better and smarter and stronger in anything that you're applying yourself to. You have the idea in this kind of mindset that no matter how much intelligence I have, I can always increase it through effort. She termed these two types of mindset, fixed mindset, the former that I was describing, and a growth mindset, the growth of a seed when you plant it. And in her research, Dweck discovered that even very young children actually lean one way or the other, even as young as 3 or 4. In reality, as she studied and did experiments with children in the preschool age through elementary years, middle school, high school, and college, it actually turns out that most of us are a combination. So about 40% of a large sample of people from a variety of ages, about 40% are fixed mindset, as identified by something like this little quiz you took. About 40% are growth mindset, and about 20% are undecided. So in truth, it appears that we have a proclivity leaning one way or the other, and depending on what challenge we're facing, we might have a particular thing that we are particularly fixed about. Fill in the blank. It seems like we all have one, like, oh, I'm never gonna touch the plumbing tools because I know I'm gonna break the bathroom faucet. Or, oh yeah, that's no problem. I can help you get online. I'm a computer whiz. So people have things that they feel very strongly that they're good or very strongly that they're bad about. But yeah, most of us are a combination of things. One thing that Dweck wondered when she was doing her research is about motivation. So what is it about you, or what is it about a student that makes you decide to do something? What motivates you to engage or not engage with any particular task? She found out that the mindset that you hold actually has an effect on that. And the same is true for effort. When you think about effort and you think about how some people try very hard and other people don't, why is that? Well, one thing that affects it is the mindset that you hold. So a student, for example, can ponder when faced with a task to do it or to not do it, to engage or not to engage. And when a student is deciding to engage or not to engage, one thing that's inextricably linked to their view on effort is their goals. Like what do you want to get out of this thing that you're going to do or not do? It turns out that your mindset is a strong predictor of what your goals are. A goal being like an aim or a desire. So if I'm going to apply myself to a certain thing, what do I hope to get out of it? And Dr. Dweck noticed that there were 2 different kinds of goals. There's performance goals and mastery goals. Let's say there's a student who is driven by performance goals. What that means is that student primarily wants to avoid looking dumb and wants to look smart. So that is their ultimate goal. They have a need to feel superior. Sometimes it's called an ego-driven goal. They really want to protect their self-image. So they don't want anybody to make fun of them for getting the wrong answer. They don't want anybody to think that they're not capable. So it's a kind of goal where they just want to keep themselves safe. And people with a fixed mindset often have this as their goal. They might not be aware of it. Typically they're not, especially if we're talking about children. But that is what the research has shown. Another kind of goal is a learning goal. This kind of person, a learning goal is also called a mastery goal. So for this student, the reason why they're motivated to do something is because they like challenging things. They like to take on things that they previously didn't know, because their number one goal in life is to learn more, to become better, to improve, to get smarter, to get stronger, to jump that much higher or run that much faster. Those kinds of things, if you have a growth mindset, that is typically what drives you. You like the challenge because you know it's going to make you faster, stronger, better, smarter, all of that. They value opportunity to learn above all else. So then there's a question of effort. Turns out the 2 mindsets engender very different attitudes about effort. Some students work very, very hard. Other students are like, whatever, I don't really care, I'm not even going to do it. they're apathetic. So a student's view about effort, whether they view effort as something good or something bad, there's a correlation between mindsets and how a student views effort. A student who has a growth mindset, believes that the harder I try, the more I will learn, and the more I practice, the better I will become. So they're not afraid to try, to get down and dirty, to really dig in and attempt to get better at something, because their ultimate goal is to become smarter, stronger, faster, better. A fixed mindset, on the other hand, we can see that it reflects back on the goal, the performance goal thing. If you have a fixed mindset, the student or child just thinks, if I try hard, I won't look smart. And also that no matter how hard I try, I won't get any better. So there's that old saying, never let them see you sweat. And that's what somebody with a fixed mindset is going to be thinking. They're like, if I exert effort, then these people are going to think I'm incapable or I don't really know what I'm doing. And then they're going to judge me as being stupid or less capable, and I don't want that. So therefore, I'm not even going to try because I don't want to risk that. So one study I wanted to share, Dweck has done so many studies, right? She's been doing it since like the mid-70s. So if you Google her, if you want to learn more, there's so much out there that has her name on it and also her colleagues. So she did one particular study. It was longitudinal, it was over 2 years, and she wanted to assess the effect that growth mindset had on, goals and academic achievement. So she took a group of people who were at the end of their 6th grade, and these young people, they were all the same in that they all had scored in the 75 percentile on this math standardized test thing, maybe whatever the basic skills test in the state that she was looking at. So she tested them, or looked at their scores. She also gave them, the students, an assessment very much like what you just filled out. So she got an idea of how the students, which mindset they identified with, which theory of intelligence they were most aligned with. And then she tracked not just their theories of intelligence by giving them multiple assessments over the next 2 years, but she also tested their math scores. She wanted to do it at a time of great challenge for these young people. And as we recall, or if you haven't been there yet, sometimes the transition from 6th grade to 7th grade is ripe with challenge. You often switch schools, you often have a new peer group. The academic rigor sometimes becomes much more intense. Expectations and homework increase. So she wanted to test these young people to see what did they do at a time of great stress. And as it turns out, the people with the growth mindset, actually their math scores increased over those 2 years compared to where they were at the end of 6th grade, end of 8th grade. Their scores were higher on those tests. The students with the fixed mindset, their scores actually decreased. And what I think is even more important is that the growth mindset students continue to choose learning goals in school. They would say things like, well, I want to do it because it's hard, because I know it's going to make me better. And the fixed mindset students would really just choose the performance goals. They would say things or identify with statements that said, I like looking smart, I don't want to make mistakes. And in addition, the young people who identified with the growth mindset, they reported being happier at school. They were less depressed. They were less anxious than the people with a fixed mindset. That was an interesting study. Another part about mindset that's important is response to failure. So when you do face a challenge, what causes one person to give up and another person to keep on trying? Well, what happens about resiliency in the face of challenge? What factors affect this? I bet you can predict that mindset has an effect on this too. Here's a big thing that affects how you respond to failure. It's called the attribution response. It means to what do you attribute your failure? Do you attribute it to internal conditions, like it's something that you did or didn't do? Or do you attribute it to external conditions, like it's somebody else's fault? And depending on your mindset, that affects what answer you would give to that. So for a growth mindset student, when faced with a failure, they would say something like, well, it's because I didn't study hard enough. It's because I didn't spend enough time on the particular things that I was being tested on. They would maybe say, I didn't study in the right way. I should have studied, it would have been better if I had studied with flashcards instead of just reading the book over and over again. They come up with a different strategy, and they would say, well, I just need to refocus and try again. A student with a fixed mindset, they would blame it on a lack of inherent ability, a lack of intelligence. They would say, I just wasn't smart enough. Or they could blame it on external circumstances. That test was unfair. No, she didn't tell us that was going to be on the test. Or that teacher doesn't even like me, that's why I failed. Something like that. And so then once you do fail, if you do fail, and you have a growth mindset, I mean, really, you will fail. Failure is a fact, right? If you have a growth mindset, the students with a growth mindset, they display a high resiliency. If they fall, they get back up, they dust themselves off, they try again. They have positive effort-based strategies. They're happy to take remedial classes. They recognize that they need help, and they will, if it's offered, agree to take a remedial class to boost their skills. Because to them, it's not shameful to do that. It just means, oh, I need to get better at this. Here's a way I can do it. They're excited to improve. It's like my yoga teacher says when you're in one of those postures where you're balancing, and the yoga teacher, you fall out, and then you fall out, and my yoga teacher will say, fall out 10 times, you're human. Get back in 11 times, you are yogi. It's like, yes, yes. That same teacher also says, there's no elevator to success. You gotta take the stairs. That's a good one. I do the Bikram yoga, in the hot room. Man, does that need a growth mindset to do that? If you have a fixed mindset, if a student has a fixed mindset, they're tending to have this helpless response. And for somebody with a fixed mindset, it's not even that I have failed, it is that I am a failure. It's very personalized. It's very much like, I'm just too dumb. I'm never going to be good at this. I hate this. I'm never going to be good. And they tend to just throw up their hands in despair. They're too embarrassed to accept remedial help. When asked about what they would do differently after failing, the fixed mindset student would say something like, they would self-handicap. They'll say, I'll study even less to show how little I care. Or they would even cheat because they don't want to be humiliated. They don't want to look dumb. In summary, for this section, the consequences of mindsets. Growth versus fixed. Your goal in school, fixed, look smart. Growth is just to learn. If you have a fixed mindset, the student does not value effort because it indicates to them that they're dumb. Versus a growth mindset student, yes, they value effort. They know the harder they try, the better they're going to get. The reaction to failure with a fixed mindset, I give up, I quit. I don't want people to think I'm dumb, so I'm not even going to try again. Growth mindset would just develop a new strategy, try harder. And achievement, like we saw in that middle school study, academic achievement is lower for a fixed mindset and higher for a growth mindset. Dweck has this caveat that a growth mindset is not a magic pill. So no matter how much I practice, no matter how hard I apply myself, no matter how many hours I spend on the basketball court, NBA is not recruiting me. I'm pretty confident about it. The Trailblazers are not calling me up saying, hey, Becca, you want to be guard? I'd be like, yeah, no matter how much growth mindset, that's not going to happen. I'm not going to Harvard. I know that. No matter how much growth mindset I have, I'm really not going to Harvard at this stage of my life anyway. It's not going to make anyone an Olympic swimmer just by having a growth mindset. What it does mean if you have a growth mindset is that you recognize that everyone has potential, that one's abilities can always be strengthened and increased. And that's a really good feeling to have. How many parents are in the audience? Oh, good. I'm so glad. So what can parents do to help support and cultivate a growth mindset in their young children, in their old children, or maybe even in yourselves? One thing you can do that's very effective is that you can tell true stories. We human beings learn a lot through stories, especially children. If you tell them a story, the children in my classroom loved, like they would beg for, stories about when I fell down and got hurt, or when I tried to do something and made a fool out of myself. They love hearing about that. They loved hearing about when I learned to snowboard, which I did, as an adult, because I'm from Ohio and there's not much good skiing in Ohio. So yeah, I learned it when I moved to Oregon, and I enjoyed telling the children about how I tried so hard and kept falling, and I tried so hard and kept falling. And then by the end of the day, I was able to go about 10 meters before I fell. And next time I was able to go on the easiest slope without falling, et cetera, like that. So tell your children about the times you struggled and failed, or about people who tried very hard, failed, and then tried again and didn't give up. Check your own response to things like what we were talking about. So if you catch yourself saying out loud, whether it's just to yourself or with your children in the room, something like, oh, I'm so bad at technology, I can't even try this. I've never been good at technology, I can't do this. Or, fill in the blank, whatever skill you feel like you're not very good at. Think about that. And what if you flipped it? Be careful what you say to yourself, because yourself is listening. So flip it and say something like, maybe, wow, this technology is very challenging for me. If you're interested in it, maybe you'll pursue doing some research and figuring it out. If you're not interested, then you'll just say, oh, I'm going to ask my friend for help and let them do it, or pay somebody money to come fix the sink. It's okay to do that too. You're allowed to choose what you want to focus on, but check yourself. If you're always dissing yourself for being like, I'm so bad at math, your children can hear you, and that will inculcate that attitude in them too. Here's something that I encourage parents to do, to learn something new with your children. Take roller skating lessons together, take snowboarding lessons together, take violin lessons together, surfing, skateboarding, whatever it is. Learn a new language together. And if you would rather do it by yourself, let your child see what's happening for you in your learning process. So you go to attend an adult education Chinese language class, and you come home and you're studying and you're saying out loud, and maybe your child can hear, oh, this is really hard, but I really want to learn it. I'm going to keep practicing. And that kind of modeling is very, very powerful. Maybe you know this about Michael Jordan. He's got a little video that I found. It's about, he says, in my career, I've missed 9,000 shots or more. There's been more than 300 games that I've lost. There's been 26 times that I missed the game-winning shot. And he says, and that is why I succeed. And that about sums it up, You just keep trying. Michael Jordan fails all the time. Reading books, especially about people or characters that struggle or that don't give up, because when a child is listening to a book, when any of us actually, we inherently put ourselves in the character's shoes. We become that person that is in the book. So you could read a child a book about a character who is struggling. It could be a true life story. You could read a book about Einstein. You could talk about how, his parents thought he had a learning disability because it took him so long to talk. They thought he was there was something not neurologically correct about him. He dropped out of school at the age of 15. It wasn't so much because he was failing, it was more like he was really disappointed in the rote memory aspect of it. He wanted to go so much further with creativity and imagination, but the school wouldn't let him. He flunked the first time he tried to get into the University of Zurich. He excelled in the math aspect, but he flunked the botany, the biology, the language aspect. He tried again the next year and he got in. So even Einstein, he fails, he tried again. Here's a quote from Einstein: the important thing is not to stop questioning I'm going to try again. The important thing is not to stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existing. I like that one a lot. I want to tell you a story about Naomi, who's probably like 15 now. And when she came to me, she was a little bit older than 3. She was probably like 3.5. And so, I showed her on the very first day the large button frame. And probably most of you know what that is, right? You practice buttoning. There's 3 big buttons. Oh, that was so easy for her. So right away, that very same day, I showed her the small button frame, which has like 5 buttons. They're smaller, and it involves a little bit more dexterity. And then like the next day, that was very easy for her too. So the next day she came, and I showed her the buckle frame, which is pretty complex for a 3.5-year-old. It involves a lot more steps. There's a strap, there's a prong, there's a slide, like a piece of metal. You got to tuck the strap in under the stop thing. So I gave her the lesson, and then I opened the buckles and I closed the buckles. I said, "You can do it." She's like, "Okay," she's a very happy child. So I watched her, and she's trying and trying and trying, and after about maybe 5 or 6 minutes, she comes over, and I was watching her get more and more frustrated. I was waiting to see, should I intervene? Should I not intervene? She came to me, she's like, "Michelle, I need help. I can't do this." And I said, "Okay." So I came over, and I very carefully, I had been watching, and the part that she was stuck on was how to line up the prong very precisely with the hole. So she's like putting the prong there and then bringing the strap over, but there's no prong emerging through the hole. You guys are with me, right? You know buckles. And so I showed her very slowly and carefully. And I probably even said something like, "Oh, we have to get the prong through the hole, so let's see if we could see that." And so I did one, and so she watched. And then I said, "You can do the rest." And as I walked away carrying my stool, I heard her saying to herself, "I think I can, I think I can, I think I can." You know the book, The Little Engine That Could. I had never read that book to the children. She'd only been in my room 2 days anyway. But somebody in her life had read that book, and she was using it. "I think I can." If you don't know the story, it's about this train going up a hill. "I think I can, I think I can." And then finally, the train's at the top. "I know I can," or "I knew I could." I can't remember, but it's something about the positive self-talk that Naomi got out of that book. It really, really worked. Allow your children to struggle. Well, first I want to give you a disclaimer. I myself have chosen to remain child-free. I recognize it's the hardest job in the world. All love and respect to the parents. Oh my goodness. So I'm coming from a place of, I only know what I know. I do know that if you allow your child to struggle when things are small, it is much easier for them to keep on going through life and deal with the struggles. Allow your child to experience real life consequences. Assuming there's no imminent danger of death or decapitation, let them fall. Let them be disappointed. Let them feel what it feels like that because you forgot to do A and B, then C is or isn't going to happen because of what you did or didn't do. If you allow them to experience that now when things are smaller, assuming your children are smaller, things will get easier. Maybe you've heard about these helicopter parents. Maybe you've read about them, where their children are in school, they're in college, their children are 20 years old, and the mom is calling up to say, "Oh yeah, hello, Dean of the English department. My daughter, she told me she got a D on her essay. What's going on?" Like, no, it's like her daughter's 20. Or parents calling colleges. You can read these online. I've read the stories saying to the, the resident assistant in the dorm, my son is complaining that his roommate is snoring, and can he get a new room? And like it's a mom or a dad calling when the young adult is 20 years old. Don't be that parent. Let that child struggle. Let them deal with it. Let them learn from it. You can only learn by doing it. There's some things to think about, what to say instead of be careful. When we say be careful to the child, it expresses a big distrust of their capabilities and capacity. And it also becomes, because we tend to say it over and over again, it becomes so rote so that the child doesn't even really pay attention to it. So some other things you could say instead of be careful. You could say, if the child's climbing a structure, oh, what's your next move? Where will you put your foot next? Or maybe they're climbing a tree. Does that branch feel stable enough to hold your weight? What's your next move? Where will you put your hand next? Which branch? So, instead of saying be careful because you have anxiety, instead just ask some questions so that they can be guided around what would be helpful to think about next. Asking or saying be careful can really produce a lot of anxiety in children. It's like, be careful of what? There's some unseen danger that only adults can see. Why are they always telling me to be careful? Like, I'm stressing out. So yeah, you can be creative, think about things to say instead of be careful. And then there's a question of praise. Praise is a pretty big deal. There was this whole movement back in probably the late 70s into the 80s. It was all about, promote positive self-esteem in your child. Tell them how great they are. One time I witnessed on a playground a child coming down a slide repetitively. It involved steps up, slide down, steps up, slide down. The child was not yet 3, probably 2.5, experiencing great joy with his large body movement. Every time he slid down the slide, the mom said, "Good job." And I'm just like, why are you continuing? I mean, I know I sound completely judgy right now. I don't even have a child, but I'm just like, why are you? The child has so much joy. And the mom had so much joy. And so she just wasn't cognizant, I don't think, of how empty that praise could really be. The entity praise versus the effort praise. Entity praise is when you are telling a child that they're so great because of something that they were born with or that is innate. Like, you are such a smart child, or you are really good at this. I mean, that doesn't sound like you're being a bad parent, right? That's rather complimentary sounding. But what happens is if the child is always hearing this kind of praise, and then they have this idea oh, I'm so smart, and then, oh, what if I get a bad grade on my test? That means I'm not smart. And then, oh, I thought I was smart because my mom and dad keep telling me I'm smart. A better route to go is with the effort praise. Things where you notice something that your child has done that has led to this result, offer them some description of what they've done that has allowed them to be successful. This is more meaningful in all ways. So, for example, in the classroom, it would be something like a child comes to me and proudly shows me some multiplication tables they finished. And instead of saying good job, which is kind of empty sounding and it's not very authentic, I could say something like, oh yeah, Charles, I watched you this morning. You focused on that. I think you focused on it for a whole hour. And look, you finished, let me see. Yep. You did the whole table of 4s, the whole tables of 5, and the whole table of 6s. Wow, how do you feel? Do you feel so proud? The child's beaming, so you can tell. You go, oh, do you feel so happy with your work? So something like that, or with the artwork, something where you just notice what happened. Or really the easiest and best thing to do is tell me how you feel about your work. Tell me about your painting. Tell me about the story you wrote. Tell me about your math work. And then let them tell you about how great they feel. This effort praise results in more enjoyment in solving problems and in better performance overall. I have a quote from Montessori, which I think is just a very good quote. She writes, "To tell a person he is clever or clumsy, bright or stupid, good or bad, is a form of betrayal. The child must see for himself what he can do." And that's really very Montessori. Well, it is Montessori, but it is very much how we do it. The child must see for himself what he can do. Not what his mom, dad, or teacher praise him for, but what he himself sees he can do. I had a child once who every time they showed their mom their painting, they did a painting every day, the mom would always say, "Oh, that's so beautiful. That's the most beautiful painting you've done." And it happened day after day. And I was just the child, I don't really know usually the child would just be sort of throwing it at their mom and then going off to do something. I don't know. It's just how could it always be the most beautiful painting you've ever done? So the question of praise, yes. Right, failure does happen. It's a fact of life. Okay, so how can we best support our children when they do fail? listen. Listen compassionately and intently and without judgment. And refrain from interrupting, refrain from comparing. I'm going to say about 50% of my time with children was spent listening, and probably closer to 60%, and maybe on some days even more. Young children, old children, adults, we all just want to be heard. And so when somebody comes to you and they're upset because they failed, all you really need to do is nod your head and say, oh, and just listen. At that moment in time, that's the best thing you can do. We don't always need advice. Sometimes all we need is a hand to hold, an ear to listen, and a heart to understand. So just because somebody's coming to you and they're telling you something sad or disappointing that happens, you don't need to give advice to them. If they ask for advice, then of course, if your child says, do you have any ideas on what I should do? Then of course you're going to offer ideas, but it's much better to wait until a neutral time to brainstorm with a child or a young person about ideas they could possibly, to brainstorm ideas on how to solve or get better at whatever just happened. So when somebody is full of emotion is not the time to problem solve. We have this idea in Montessori called grace and courtesy lessons. It's very preemptive. It's where we show to the child at a neutral time, not when grandma is coming into the classroom. We're going to practice before Grandparents' Day. We're going to act out. Today I'm going to show you how to welcome your grandmother into the classroom, and we're going to practice it. So it's fun. It's a neutral time. Grandma isn't anywhere around. We're just play acting. And in this way, we prepare the child in advance for something they're going to need to apply in real life. The same thing can be true for brainstorming ideas on strategies for how to help a child who has failed. Do it at a neutral time, after the emotion is over dinner, whatever. So do you feel like thinking about ways you might approach studying for a history test next time? Because I have some ideas if you want to hear them. And depending on their age, they may say yes or they may say no, or you'll ride that out in your own way. Montessori truly does embrace growth mindset. It's like built into the whole system. Research has shown that these are some ways that teachers can help students cultivate a growth mindset. This is taken from Dweck, and she's not talking about she's not a Montessorian. Well, she doesn't know she's a Montessorian. But so provide meaningful tasks that follow the child's interest. Present tasks that are challenging but realistic. Emphasize mastery of the skill over the performance, and focus on the value of learning something new. That sounds pretty Montessori. Here's a quote: "Nothing is preordained, but everything is possible." Montessori really believed that everything is possible. She talks about when a child is born that they are like a nebulae. You know, a nebulae, like a collection of gases, celestially speaking, up there. It's in real life. Nebulae are happening right now. And they're like rolling balls of gas. And at some moment, that rolling ball of gas becomes a star. And Montessori describes this like celestial potential of the child when they're born. We do not know what they're going to become. We don't know what kind of star they're going to be. But all of the potential is there. Every single element of who that child's going to become is there. And there's some pregnant lady right now in the audience, and so that's really cool because there's like potential building up. Here's another quote. "To stimulate life, leaving it free, however, to unfold itself. That is the first duty of the educator." Yeah, like you won't see that on any kind of public school curriculum. I can pretty much guarantee that. Not that, I'm trying to say we're better, but I'm just saying. Yeah, Dr. Montessori, she describes the unlimited potential as a kind of awakening of potential powers. She describes the child as a creation that is always in the process of realization. So constantly constructing him or herself, constantly developing themselves. So here's one way we help children do that. We help them by allowing them to engage in meaningful work. So this young child here is working with something called the stamp game. Looks like she might be doing some division. And she has an observer who is probably a little bit younger than her. What is causing this child to be so focused? It's not because the teacher's telling her to do it. It's because she's interested. She is motivated not because she wants to get a good grade or a gold star or get the teacher's approval. She's motivated in this work because she finds it meaningful, not because somebody else does. She chose it because it has meaning for her. These children are allowed to make a free choice. They have time to work. She can work on that potentially for 3 hours, for 5 hours. She could come back to it the next day. She could do long division for like a week. And no teacher, hopefully, would ever say, don't do long division for a week. She could just keep going. The children might find it meaningful to socialize, and they're at liberty to do that. They might find meaning in serving the needs of the community, of slicing the banana and serving it to their friends, and they're at liberty to do that. So meaningful work is truly built into the Montessori thing because the child chooses it based on their own interest. Therefore, ergo, it's meaningful to them. The right amount of challenge, that's Violet and Miriam. They were in my classroom. That's my classroom. They're so cute. Miriam and Violet. Miriam is helping Violet read. She really did teach Violet how to read. She spent so much time with Violet. So the right amount of challenge. There's this Russian psychologist that was popular in the 60s named Vygotsky. Maybe you've heard of him. There's a guy named Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. He writes about flow. He writes about, Vygotsky writes about something called the zone of proximal development. And Mihai Csikszentmihalyi writes about flow. He writes about finding the match between interest and challenge. And both of those people and a Montessori teacher looks to show a child something that is like, if this is their level of expertise, they want to show them a lesson that is right here. Because that is what's going to get the child interested. If you show a child something that is down here, they're just going to be bored. If you're way up here, they're going to be like, what? I don't even know what you're talking about. Therefore, I'm not even going to engage. So the timing of a lesson in a Montessori classroom depends very much on the guide observing and noticing. This child appears to have mastered the buckle frame. I'm ready, and I think this child is ready to now engage with the bow tying frame. But if I jumped from those large buttons to the bow, that'd be way too high. And if I tried to show her something like, I don't know, the bow or the button frame again, she'd be like, what? That's too boring. So the right amount of challenge happens in the Montessori classroom. We emphasize the process over the product. It doesn't matter if Naomi had put that buckle frame back without all the buckles buckled precisely. It doesn't matter at all. What matters is that she was interested, that she tried her best. Most likely they weren't all buckled precisely. That is okay. Somebody will fix it. It won't be me. It probably won't be her, but it'll be somebody. Some 5-year-old's going to come along and be like, oh, someone didn't do the buckle frame right. I got to fix that. And then they'll do it. The children have something about, perhaps you've heard the term human tendencies. We all have them. They're things that motivate us along in life. We all actually have a human tendency for self-perfection. It drives us to get better and better at something. It doesn't mean we're perfect. It just means we complete a work to our own personal level of satisfaction. And if you've ever been in a flow state in your garden or with your computer or with your guitar, and you're trying something and you finally get in, you're like, oh, and you feel complete. That is the human tendency for self-perfection. And it drives this circle of like, I'm interested in something, therefore I'm going to practice and repeat it. And then I'm going to get to a place of self-perfection. And then I'm going to repeat it because I want to get even better and I want to get even better. Miriam, the one on your right, when she was about 4, I was showing her a lesson on how to thread a needle. And she worked at it. It's pretty challenging, right, to get the thread through that tiny eye of the needle. And I watched her. It was such a long time, and she never even got frustrated, but she kept trying and kept missing for really 20 minutes. And I kept my eye because I'm like, you want to intervene if there is frustration getting to the point of eruption, boiling over, temper tantrum. You want to be like, oh, hey, can I help you? She never got frustrated, but she did come to me and she's like, Michelle, this isn't working. Can you help me? And I said, sure. And so I modeled for her something about, and I probably use language sort of like with the buckle frame. This is the eye of the needle. I just want to get this thread right through the eye of the needle. Or you might think about it that you want to get the eye of the needle over the thread. And then she tried it, and she was right in front of me when she tried it, and she did it. And I said something like, you did it. And she goes, it's easy when you know how. It's like, you're right. It's easy when you know how. That was the right amount of challenge for her. It's easy when you know how. Yeah, that's a good one. So yes, it's important that we value the mastery of the skill over the performance, the process over the product. This child spilled the beans from his pouring or her pouring. He spilled the beans on that one. Nobody's gonna scold the child for that. No one's gonna be like, what? That's the third time you've spilled them. The child isn't feeling shamed at all. The child is allowed to spill the beans, and then they're just shown, here's the broom and dustpan to sweep them up. I once had a child, when she came to me, you were allowed to pour your milk every day at lunch. And for it's typical that you're going to spill milk, right? When you're only 3.5 or whatever, and you're pouring it from it was a child-sized pitcher into her glass. But she kept overflowing it, and she wouldn't catch herself in time. That happened for so long, every day, for almost a month. She would overflow it, she would get the cloth and clean it up. And then the next day at lunch, she would do it again and do it for a whole month. And I was just like, wow, that's interesting that she's really, so, I did things like showed her some extra special pouring lessons, using a funnel, getting things, blah, 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 into all these different vessels of different sizes. And well, anyway, eventually she got it. There was a day where she didn't spill her milk, and then she continued in that vein, and I'm sure she's able to pour her milk now fine without a problem. But yeah, so that whole time, that whole process, it took her a month. What can we do? We can just let the child do it. This friendliness with error is crucial to the Montessori classroom. My attitude, the teacher's attitude towards error, to model that mistakes are normal and valuable, that they're where we learn. This multi-age grouping that happens in a Montessori classroom is very helpful for that. The child can see children who are just a little bit older than them engaging in doing some work and doing it without making mistakes. Therefore, they know that they themselves will get there too. And really just the whole attitude. It happened a lot in my classroom with things like handwriting or mental insets. If there's this work with a pencil and you're making these lines. And I would often model friendliness with error with that, because we had this practice of I'm gonna write a G on the chalkboard. And then I would engage with the child I was working with. This is pretty good, this G, but I feel like my line where I made this curve going up, it's too wide. I want to make it more narrow. I'm going to try it again. And I would literally say those kinds of things out loud so that the child understood, you have to keep trying, it's not going to be perfect, and that's normal and okay. In a Montessori classroom, a mistake is just an interesting problem to solve. We have this ability to self-correct. Perhaps you're familiar with this idea of a mechanical control of error. Those cylinders, each cylinder only fits in one of those sockets. When the child gets to the end of doing the work, if they've made a mistake, there'll be a cylinder that doesn't fit. The teacher doesn't have to stand there and tell them, oh, look, you have that one's in the wrong hole. They don't need a teacher to do that at all. They are at liberty to make mistakes as often as they would like. They're usually not intentional mistakes. They're at liberty to work with a material and to engage with it because they're interested in it, and not have to depend on some outsider like a teacher to tell them whether they did it right or wrong. We have these tendencies towards precision and exactitude. Children are driven by that. We have things like control charts in math so that you could check your own work. You don't have to ask the teacher to circle the wrong ones with a red pencil. You can find out for yourself if 7 plus 9 really is 16. Oh, look, I wrote 15. Oh, I can change that. It's all independent. It's really, really powerful for self-esteem. If you've ever observed in a Montessori classroom, you know what I mean when I say warm and supportive atmosphere. There's mixed ages, there's love of effort, and there's a sense of belonging. There's a community, a collaborative feeling to it all. There's joy in helping, there's respect. Children in a Montessori classroom understand that it's highly respected to take on challenging work and that it's normal to make mistakes. They feel that adults are there to support them in their learning, not to judge, not to give them a grade. It's not that Montessori teachers don't evaluate. We're actually always evaluating through our observations, and as the children get older, through actually more direct kind of assessment. But the child feels like the teacher is there to support them. There's a spirit of exploration in a Montessori classroom. I don't know how many times in my career I would say to a child, I wonder what would happen if, da-da-da-da-da. Like, I wonder what would happen if you actually combine the brown stair with the pink tower. The child says, huh. And they go forth and explore creatively and make some discoveries about how that three-dimensional cube aligns perfectly with that two-dimensional brown prism with this patterns they can make and this exploration that can occur. Nobody's teaching it to them, they're doing it themselves. Barbara Kingsolver is an author that I like very much. And I have a quote from her that I got out of this magazine called The Sun that I subscribe to. It's a fabulous magazine. It's a writer magazine, ad-free. So there's an interview with Barbara Kingsolver. Her children went to Montessori school. And so I want to read to you what she says. There's something I have often said to my children so often that they now chant it back to me. You can do hard things. I sent my kids to a Montessori preschool, and thank heavens I did, because most of what I learned about parenting came from those wonderful Montessori teachers. They straightened me out about self-esteem. There's this myth that self-esteem comes from making everything easy for your children and making sure they never fail. If they never encounter hardship or conflict, the logic goes, they'll never feel bad about themselves. Well, that's ridiculous. That's not even a human life. Kids learn self-esteem from mastering difficult tasks. It's as simple as that. The Montessori teachers told me to put my 2-year-old on a stool and give her the bread, give her the peanut butter, give her the knife, a blunt knife, and let her make that sandwich and get peanut butter all over the place. Because when she's done, she'll feel like $1,000,000. I thought that was brilliant. Raising children became mostly a matter of enabling them and standing back, getting out of the way and watching. And that's a very good quote from Barbara Kingsolver. Okay, does mindset matter? Well, maybe you think it does. After all this, it has definitely been proven that mindset, a growth mindset, helps in all of these ways to help a person lead a happy, a creative life with a lot of resiliency and a strong moral character. You know the myth of Sisyphus, right? Always rolling up the rock to get to the top, and then it comes tumbling back down. So he has to start again, roll up the rock to the top of the mountain, tumbles back down. Camus has this great perspective on it. The struggle itself towards the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. So that's kind of funny. Yeah. Maybe you've heard about this guy.
I am Shaquem Griffin. I know what you're thinking. Trust me.
Trust me, you don't know half the story.
I was born with a rare condition called amniotic band syndrome.
Amniotic band syndrome.
When I was 4, I was in so much pain. I tried to cut my own fingers off with a kitchen knife. My mom took me to the doctors for surgery.
And when I walked out of that hospital,
My left hand was gone.
my left hand was gone.
My parents raised me the same as my twin brother, Shaquille.
They never let me believe I was anything less than he was.
To be honest, though,
Sometimes I wondered, why did this happen to me?
To me.
To me.
Why did this happen to me?
why did this happen to me? When I was 8, a opposing coach tried to get me disqualified from a youth football game. He believed that football was a two-handed game.
And I shouldn't be allowed to play.
I shouldn't be allowed
I
to
shouldn't
play.
be allowed
I
to
shouldn't be allowed to play.
It was that moment when I made a decision. I was never going to quit.
even if the world wanted me to.
I had to prove them wrong. Not this, that coach, but everyone.
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 Everyone. Everyone.
Because while my hand may be gone, what made me different was my heart,
My heart.
My heart.
my mind,
My mind. My mind.
my will.
My will. My will.
People stared and snickered.
What's wrong with you?
We should take it easy on him.
They should have a different league for you.
In high school, their voices got louder.
Why are you even here?
Drag the team down.
You're making everyone uncomfortable.
I learned to use it.
I learned to use it as fuel,
Prove that I belong.
prove that I belong. My twin brother was always there for me. We was doing this together. At the University of Central Florida, where Shaquille got the chance to show what he can do,
And ultimately made it to the league.
I was dropped to the third string, then the practice squad. And then before the third season, I was sent home. After all I've been through, after all I overcome, I almost did it. I almost quit. Then I thought about everybody who was like me, who had to fight every day to get the chance to be treated like equals. And I realized
This.
this is why it happened to me.
Set Shaquem Griffin.
So I earned my way back on the field, led the team in tackles, became the AAC Defensive Player of the Year, and helped UCF become the only undefeated team in the nation. Listen to that word again, undefeated. Doubt me all you want.
Doubt me all you want.
What matters,
Is this.
I'll never again doubt myself.
I am Shaquem Griffin.
I'm determination.
I am resolved.
I am unstoppable. I am a role model. I am against all odds.
I am Shaquem Griffin.
I am Shaquem Griffin.
I am Shaquem Griffin.
I am Shaquem Griffin.
You only know half my story.
You only know half my story.
Because the other half?
The other half?
It's yet to be written.
Yes.
So at the beginning of your talk, you emphasized, it seemed like that mindset has to do with your view of intelligence.
Yeah.
Whereas, like the video, just to take one aspect, it seems like it's much more about attitude. Can you talk about how those two things really, because they seem quite different to me.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So I think the way we could think about it is your view of intelligence, or whether you're born with it or whether it can be developed. Is that what you're thinking about? Like the fact of it, that slide that had the DNA spiral or the sprout coming up?
Right.
Yeah. So if you're thinking like that you are born with a certain amount of intelligence and you can never increase it, that certainly would have an effect on your attitude about how you could be like Shaquem, right? How you could be like, if I feel like I can never get better, then why would I even try? But if you have an idea that what I was born with is what I was born with, but that doesn't have to limit me, that I can always increase it and get stronger or learn more, then that means that I will actually continue to try, even against all odds, and to have this sense of resilience and perseverance and grit, that keeps you from giving up. So it's like the reason the attitude is influenced by the idea of how you think about whether intelligence or really anything like strength or something like that is something you can develop and improve upon, or whether you're born with a certain amount and that's it. Does that help you a little bit? What else? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. So if I'm understanding correctly, the term mindset is really pinpoints your attitude about whether these aspects of your personality, your intelligence, your ability as in sports or whatever are expandable or versus limited.
Yes, it's
So
a very...
intelligence is one part of it.
Yeah, you could have a mindset about any of it. Dweck focused on intelligence, but yes, it's a very succinct way of describing it. Yeah. Yeah.
I have a 3.5-year-old who often is easily frustrated, so he'll stop trying very quickly and he'll start crying or whatever. And so I'm interested in what did you do with kids who are easily frustrated to help them like persevere for a little bit longer?
Yeah, sometimes children are very easily frustrated, and sometimes they act very differently with their mom or dad than they do with their teacher. Yeah, because in the classroom, sometimes the child, well, there's so many variables, right? But I did have children who were easily frustrated in the classroom, and I think my technique with them was to basically, you know, come over and be empathetic and ask them what's happening, or take a best guess at what was happening. You look really upset. Are you feeling frustrated because you can't get your shoes on? They'd be like, ah. It's like, okay. Would you like some help? They'd be like, yeah. And so then I could say something like, do you want me to help you? Or would you like to ask a friend to help you? Or do you want me to ask a friend to help you? So basically just listening and then responding. I think that Montessori guide, one of the things that makes our work easier than a parent's is that the clock doesn't really come crushing down quite so much as it does in a home scenario, you know? Like you have to get your child out of the house to school on time. Whereas, and so that involves them getting dressed, and the child's frustrated that they can't get their shoe on, and then you're feeling frustrated because you know you're about to be late for school, and so all this tension is building up. Whereas in the Montessori classroom, the child could actually spend as long as they want practicing how to take off their shoes and put them back on, or how to button their coat or something like that. So probably each scenario is slightly different. But listening empathetically and then seeing if you could break it down, the steps to whatever's frustrating them. They want to be independent, and sometimes they're trying to be independent and they don't yet have the skills. So sometimes I would say something like, that is really hard to open. Let me give it a try. Would you like me to give it a try? They're trying to open up the glue container, which would often get stuck. And I would say something like, this requires an adult strength to get it open. Like to let them know it's not their fault that they can't do it. Or if they're stuck with one particular aspect of, say, zipping their coat, you could say something like, which part are you stuck on? Let's see, it looks like, oh, I see, getting the big tooth all the way down there to the bottom of the stop. That's a really tricky part. That lets the child know, hey, you're not stupid. This is a tricky thing. It's tricky to get this big tooth to the bottom of the slide. So let's see, I'll show you how we can do that, and then you get it started, and then maybe you say, do you want to finish pulling it up? So acknowledging the task is hard, giving them ample time to practice at their own pace. That's what I got. Anyone else? Yes?
Yeah, I was just going to say, because I have a child also who's easily frustrated, and in some ways it gets easier as they get older, because then you're able to say, remember how hard that was to zip up that zipper? And wow, like, now you can do that.
Yes,
and
that's
they
true.
start to be like, oh yeah, I did know that.
Yeah, like I won't always be stuck in this place of not knowing how to do.
A couple of years away, but.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yes.
A few questions from live stream. The first one was from Katie. She's wondering, how would you approach your child when he likes to compare himself to his peers in a sense that he wants to be more like them or he's not good enough?
Well, that would be a great opportunity to listen and ask more questions. Tell me more about what you like about your friend. What do you really admire about them? Oh, you really admire, and then I'm not sure because Kate's not here, but you really admire that they're like this. Yeah, that is a very admirable quality. You know, I really admire my friend at work who, for whatever reason, you admire them. And the comparison I think really is it's a thing, right? It's kind of normal. Like we as human beings are like, wow, I really, especially as the child gets into the second plane, into 6 and older, they want to win the race. They want to kick the ball further. I think just acknowledging it, saying, yes, I can see that you really want to beat that kid in that race, or you really want to do this. I can understand where you're coming from. So, and then just offer the words of support about you can practice as much as you like. And I don't think it's that helpful to say things like, don't compare yourself, or not everybody can be good at everything. Like those kinds of things don't tend to be very helpful to children. It's more just like listen and help your child to know that you're there for them, and that you can ask questions like, well, is there anything I can do to support you? If it's a child who's old enough to like be able to think like that, can you think of anything I can do to support you? Do you want me to help you think of ways to improve your running, kicking, writing, math skills, something like that?
Seems like it's almost similar to the example you gave with climbing the tree, where you're asking questions where it's like, oh, like what's your strategy going to be for gaining that ability,
Yeah.
or whatever it is, where you're like sort of directing their attention.
Yeah, let them come up with the ideas, because that is really what life is about. Like if you want to get better at something, if you like Shaquem, right? He got all the way down to the practice team. He made the decision to reapply himself and to keep going. And as you may or may not know, he did just get drafted by the Seahawks. He's on the same team as his brother. So yeah, that's awesome. He did it. Yeah. Is there another question from the live stream?
Ellie, it says, I agree helicopter parenting is not the best approach, but sometimes find myself guilty of it. I liked hearing your explanation as to why failure is necessary. Are there any extra recommendations or guidelines you could give to help break the habit?
It's quite spiritual, really. It's quite spiritual. Somebody once told me, and again, I have chosen to be child-free, so I'm only theoretical about this. But somebody once told me that from the moment you give birth, it's a practice of letting go. Like from the moment the child exits your body, it is a practice of letting go. And it means letting go of that which you value more highly than anything else in the world. A baby is the most precious, precious, precious thing a parent can possibly ever even imagine. And then from the moment it's born, the quest of the human being is to become independent. It is the inner drive. It is dictated by nature. To interfere with that, any unnecessary help is an aid, is an obstacle to the child's development. So of course we're going to help the child when they need help, when they're a baby or when they're trying to figure out how to zip. But we're only going to offer the help that's necessary and sufficient, because we have to hold to an even higher place that the child's independence and self-ability is more important than me expressing love for my child through this. It's always about love. We always want to serve the needs of our child because we love them and value them. But then, as that writer eloquently put it, it's like she recognizes it can get in the way. I don't know, on the blog post on Guidepost, I referenced a poem by Kahlil Gibran, and he talks about how our children are not our children, they are the children of the future. And so it is quite spiritual. It is quite a spiritual path to practice letting your child fail. Knowing that while your child in many ways is a reflection of you, they aren't you. So even if you see your child going down a path, you're not responsible for their happiness. After a certain age, really, maybe it's even from the beginning, you really aren't responsible for their actions. You're only responsible for your own reactions to what they do. So your child is making choices and they're failing and you want to swoop in and protect them. The higher path is to not do it and to breathe deeply and know that you're on the right track, if barring, of course, decapitation or death. You're going to interfere when those things happen. It's hard. I can imagine how hard.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think part of the flip side is preparing them is the other side of it.
That's right.
You're not always there to catch them. You're there to help them to be safe along the way in their own exploration and actions and adventures.
Yes, absolutely. Well said.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it starts when it's very little. It starts by letting them spill the beans or spill the milk and showing them how to clean it up and helping them understand that this is normal and letting them deal with that. And then, yes.
Question.
Okay.
It's unrelated to what we're talking about. So I'm a first-time parent. I have a 10-month-old.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. And more recently, I'm noticing she's very strong-willed,
Mm.
and she's just very feisty. And so I love everything we learned tonight, and I want to teach this, and I want to make this like what we do in our home.
Oh, great.
I would like to know more about how to enforce boundaries, or how to, I don't want to use the word discipline because that's not what I want to do, but I know how to ask the question, but that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, limit setting is crucial, and it is interesting how the idea that discipline means something like something negative, or something to do with punishment, or something to do with withdrawing of something. In the Montessori philosophy, the discipline, the idea of discipline is not about external discipline coming from a source like a parent or a teacher. It is about discipline that the child develops within themselves. So our work as parents and teachers is to help the child develop self-discipline. Wow, when I think about that for a 10-month-old, it's amazing to really think about what that means. But I think it starts with allowing the child to have as much choice and control as possible, so that they have that real life experience with, well, making choices and with having power. Children want to be independent, and it's so often the case that they're not given a choice at all, that things just happen to them. So some things you could do with a 10-month-old would be to give them the very simple choices. If she or he is able to engage like this of what would you like to wear today, and let them pick it out, and maybe to even start to help them get dressed themselves, and basically to help your child become as independent as possible to the degree that he or she is capable of. And to embrace the feistiness is a really good sign. It's awesome. It means that she has she has a very a strong, a strong urge to live. She is alive. She is vibrant. So, but setting limits is a big part of it too, because for safety, right? And so, for example, for safety, the most easy thing to do, in my opinion, and I think in Montessori's opinion, is to prepare an environment where you very, very rarely have to say no. So prepare an environment where the things that the child's going to engage in are safe and healthy and developmentally appropriate. Avoid places where you're going to have to spend your whole time saying no. Don't actually, for the next little bit of your life, don't be going to, the places where children can't touch things or you have to say no. Instead, spend lots of time in environments that where she can engage in developmentally appropriate ways. And don't be afraid to say no, though. I think that's where some, another question on the blog on Guidepost asked, what lesson do you think is the hardest to train teachers to give? And I said, I don't think there's any particular material that's challenging. It's more the theoretical concept of freedom within limits. The idea that as a Montessori guide, or really as a parent, you have high warmth, but you also have high authority, that you are authoritative. You are not authoritarian. You're not like, no, don't do that, or I'm gonna take away your dessert or something. But that you do have high authority, that the child knows this person has my back. When my mom or dad says no, they mean it, and I listen to them, and if I don't, they're gonna do something like remove me from the situation or something. There'll be some follow through. When the child can trust that the adult means what they say and sets the limit, what happens for them is actually a strengthening of the trust and love for that person. And it's very, very important to don't view it as something mean. It's actually, you're being very helpful to the child. They can't do it themselves yet. They're children. They can't yet set the limits because they don't yet know. So we have to do it. Yeah.
Like a book or something?
Yeah, my favorite book does have the word discipline in the title. It's called Caring Discipline That Works. Maybe I know for sure the author is Joanne Nordling. Her last name is Nordling. Oh, it's called Taking Charge, ; Caring Discipline That Works. or maybe positive discipline. Anyway, she's really good. She's another one of those people that isn't a Montessorian, but she actually is. She just doesn't know it. I use her techniques often in the classroom with children who engage in the behavior of routinely not minding or are always like, no. And you're like, oh, like, what do I do with that? So you can put your tongue back in your mouth, right? Like the positive phrasing. Oh boy, there's another question.
We do. We just have one last one and probably end on this one. You talked about telling stories and reading them to nurture a growth mindset in your in children. Do you have any book recommendations that elementary students especially seem to like?
Ooh. Are there any elementary guys in the audience? Weren't we just talking, Lindsay? We were. Lindsay, what do you think? Oh, maybe you have an idea. Yes.
I have well, it's not really, it could be elementary, but it's really older primary.
Mm-hmm.
Brave Irene.
Brave Irene.
Steig.
How do you spell the last name?
Steig, wrote Amos and Boris and a few others.
Okay.
Wonderful vocabulary in his books. And Brave Irene is a great little story about it's very real life.
Yeah.
It's about a little girl who needs to run an errand basically to her for her mother because her mother is sick. And so she's going to do it. She has to go through a storm. And it's very dramatic. And
okay, well, is that all the time then? Okay, thank you. Appreciate your time.